Hello and welcome back to the Amped EV podcast. My name is David. I am the editor for The Buzz.
And I'm Christian Hinton, associate editor for Tire Review.
Christian.
Hey, David.
How are you, sir?
I'm doing really well. How are you?
Very good. Very good. Except you're wearing a jacket, and I feel like you're trying to show me up a little bit.
You took the tie from me, though. That's actually my tie that David stole from me. He just wanted to look a little better, so I gave it to him.
This is untrue, but we can discuss this later because today we actually have something important to talk about: microgrids.
Oh,
what do you know about microgrids?
I don't know much about microgrids, but I know we're talking to somebody who does, so I'm really excited.
You are 100% correct. And I'm actually really looking forward to the interview because I also don't know a whole lot about microgrids. It sounds a little daunting, but I understand it doesn't have to be.
Yes.
So today we are speaking with Terry O'Day. He is the Chief Operating Officer and co-founder of In Charge Energy. Let's get to the interview. Terry, thank you so much for joining us today. We are amped to have you on the show talking about microgrids today. Tell us a little bit about, what is a microgrids? Kind of give us the 101 course here, and why would a fleet be interested in implementing this?
Sure. Yeah. To call something a microgrid can make it kind of daunting. Now it's like this whole new thing I have to learn. But in reality, it's just the way you get power onto your property. It's a localized energy system. Most of us are drawing power from the utility, from a central power plant. But a microgrid would give you some of those tools on site. So you would have a battery or other storage device on site. You might have solar panels. You might have a natural gas generator. You might have other types of discharge. So EV charging is what we focus on, but you might also have HVAC or refrigeration, and all of those things would be linked together through a software solution with a microprocessor controller. And how that software manages those different things is really the heart of the microgrid. But for a fleet manager, you might think, I have fueling on site already. A lot of folks do, right? And so this is just a way to get fueling for EVs onto your property and give you the power to control it rather than simply being a taker from the utility.
Very interesting. And is that software that you were talking about, is that something that In Charge can help different fleets either procure, or do you supply that?
Yeah, we work with multiple types of microgrid controller software solutions. So if your facility already has some of these solutions, if your facility manager has a particular interest in one of these solutions, we can incorporate those. And we focus our software solution on being compatible to those microgrid controllers. And our software controls the chargers directly. So the fleet manager has direct control over start and stop of the chargers, scheduling, historical records, and these things are actually quite important, not just for how they interact with the vehicle, but in this conversation, importantly, how they interact with your utility service and your microgrid. And that fundamentally affects your costs and your reliability, which are the two things that fleet managers care about the most.
Sure.
Terry, what key factors should fleet owners looking to transition to renewable energy sources consider when evaluating the feasibility of integrating microgrids into their operations?
Well, the two things that I think are most important is what is the size of your fleet? How much power are you going to need and when? And what is the size of your local power source that you have on site? So we are doing microgrids in a lot of cases for fleets that don't have enough power coming into the property today, and they want to electrify on a schedule. And so, next year I want to have 50 trucks electrified, but I don't have enough power for 50 trucks. Let me call the utility. And the utility says, no problem, I'll get out there in 3 years from now. Right. So we come in and we say, listen, we can get you in business with microgrid in 9 months. And that will solve the problem, of fueling on site. And so getting control over your schedule is a really important factor in the deployment of EVs. And some of these microgrid solutions can actually be temporary. So you can imagine this as, we put this in right now, you get into business, you get in line with the utility in the 2 to 3 year time frame, you get your utility power, as planned, and then you can pick up some of those microgrid components and move it to your next property, right? So there's a lot of different strategies out there, and every time I think I'm, producing cookies in a cookie cutter, I find I'm making snowflakes in the fleet business.
You'd mentioned 3 years from a utility, and I don't think that you're exaggerating there. I have heard that from fleets before. But you had mentioned, as early as 9 months, that would be something like 25% of the wait time. Is that typical for you to be able to deliver?
Yeah, that's not atypical. I can put it that way. Like I said, typical is kind of the cookie. Everybody's
Sure.
unique. So, like, what components do you want? What other sources of electrical load do you have on the site? Are you doing refrigeration? Are you charging at night for your vehicles or charging at the daytime? All these things come into play, but 9 months is not certainly not atypical. And for a small system, we actually do have off-the-shelf products where our chargers are integrated with the battery.
Oh, very cool.
So we can get you, half dozen of those on site and put you right in business right away. So lots of different solutions that can reduce your timeline.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And so at the kind of top of the program here, you'd mentioned that microgrids, it sounds daunting. It doesn't have to be. But if I am a fleet manager and I'm looking to begin this process, how do I make sure that I am able to transition what I'm already doing into the microgrid kind of environment? How can I do that in a way that's not going to disrupt my operations too badly?
Yeah, importantly, you want to make sure that the vehicle you've chosen is the right one for your operation, and that you have a good place to plug it in, right? So for a lot of our customers who are fleets, the vehicle's parked at the dock, for example. So you want to have a charger somewhere near your dock, right? Some of them will detach the tractor and charge it elsewhere on the property. Maybe that makes sense for your operation. So thinking through first what your operational needs are is key. The second thing would be to identify where the power source is coming from onto the property, because the further you are from the power source, the larger your installation cost is going to be, right? And then thirdly, how much real estate do you have available? Everyone is constrained by the real estate on site, but some sites are more constrained than others, right? And you're going to need some space for the electrical switchgear, for the batteries, and for the chargers. So you need to think that stuff through. And once you kind of get to that point, then you start to look at the costs. When does it make sense to charge? How should I schedule my charging? When would I be pulling power from the grid, and when would I be pulling from, your on-site storage solution or the microgrid? And those things begin to factor in. For a lot of companies, though, too, your question highlighted that we're working with a fleet manager, and so many of our companies, they also have facilities managers, and those often are two different people, right? So you do have to start that conversation pretty early on. In a lot of big companies, they're two different people that have never worked together, and the fleet manager says, hey, I've got an idea. We're going to electrify the fleet. We're going to save a lot of money on fuel. And you start the conversation with the facilities manager, and they go, oh, you mean you're going to take your fuel costs and put it on my P&L?
Right.
And by the way, right? And then they go, and by the way, I just LEED certified all of our buildings, and now you're going to draw a bunch of new power through these buildings. I'm going to have to go back for my LEED certification. I've got a platinum seal on the building, and it cost me $1 million a year and a half to get it.
That's a great point.
So those kinds of things really need to kind of be worked through corporate fleets, and those conversations take some time.
You guys are talking a little bit about practicality right now, and when it comes to making the transition as smooth as possible, how can a fleet ensure that their infrastructure accommodates different EV makes and models within the same microgrid infrastructure? So that's now and in the future. How can they make sure that they are accommodated?
Yeah, it's a super valuable question. The whole notion of a microgrid gives you flexibility, right? So when you have additional vehicles, you're going to have an on-site storage solution that will allow you to flex up and flex down as market conditions change, as new models come in. This gives you the ability to kind of increase the size of your fleet if needed, increase the size of the vehicles in your fleet if needed. The chargers themselves should be pretty standard. You do have two different types of connectors out there in the market, so you want to make sure you're using the right connectors. You want to make sure you're on the right voltage for chargers. A company like ours will assure that you can do that and that future vehicles will be set up properly for you. Some of the software solutions the chargers need to talk to the vehicles, and not all charging software is enabled for all vehicles. And this is still somewhat of an early stage of the market, so you do need to do interoperability testing or work with a company that has done that for you. And on the microgrid side, I think you just need to think about, how big are you going to get, right? And it's of course a question of cost. One way to help to solve the cost problem is that we've initiated a product called Charging as a Service, or In Charge as a Service. We take your capital costs, we make them operating costs. We take a look at your total cost of operation of your fleet, and then we match that to the cost of electrification, and we charge it. We price it across a contract for a number of years in operation. So that can give you some flexibility as well and allow you to size up your facility in order to plan for your future needs.
Interesting. So kind of going off of that, let's say, charging it's evolving all the time. One thing about EVs is that it's moving so quickly that it's in a lot of ways can be more difficult to predict what's coming down the road as opposed to an ICE vehicle, for instance. So, if I decide that maybe my charging needs are inadequate after I have installed this microgrid, how simple is it for me to maybe add more chargers or, replace the chargers that I already have?
Yeah, so replacing the chargers is totally simple if you're working with a partner. You want to think of your partner not as the supplier of hardware, but as an operating and service partner going forward. So InCharge is actually optimized to be that long-term partner for you. We have our own service technicians on staff. So when I call to repair a charger, I'm calling somebody who's on my payroll to come out and fix your charger, right? It's not like, oh, hey, Terry, Coca-Cola, is an important customer for you, but they're number 5 to me today. That's not the way it's going to work. So you have to think about your service partner as integral to your planning and achievement of your objectives. And that's what we're organized for. But the other element of this is that when you're thinking about the charging solution, I have never been disappointed by putting in too much power. I don't get a lot of folks tell me, I really loved dial-up internet service. I would love to go back.
Maybe
so the more power.
That's all there is.
Yeah, that's about it. That ringtone in your ear, it just it brings back the memories. But I think that being with a team that has experience in this market over a long period is very valuable. The car behind me on the wall here was the 1996 General Motors EV1. It's the first production car ever built in electric. And it was my first job out of college working to support this car with EV charging.
Oh, wow.
So this is my 5th EV startup. The team that we pulled together here is like getting the band back together. It's friends that have worked together over the years. Most of us in the light duty side, because that's where EVs were all these years, right? And so the truck and commercial vehicle market is catching up to the light duty market. But the experience that we bring still is material to the challenges that commercial vehicles are facing today. So I think it's really valuable to have a team that has kind of been through the war, right, to help you as you go to battle.
Well, Terry, thank you so much for kind of giving us your insight on this topic. In Charge Energy is doing great things out there. I'm really excited to see kind of where things go for you down the road.
Thank you so much, Terry.
Thanks, me too. I appreciate you having me here. I'm amped up about the future of this market.
Awesome. Take care.
See you, Terry.
All right, see ya.
Okay, Christian, that was cool. What'd you
Yes,
learn?
sir. I think the biggest thing I learned was the importance of flexibility. When you think
Yeah.
of a microgrid or just the word grid in general, you think it's going to be in one place. But the
Yeah.
fact that they can move this around for the fleets, I think that's big. Obviously, fleet operations, they can sometimes move around. They need to be very flexible. So I think
Yeah.
the flexibility of having a microgrid that can literally move around with your operations, I think that's huge.
Yeah. You don't often think about having something like that it has portability built
Right,
in.
exactly.
And the fact that you can actually do that here is really interesting. I thought it was a really good point that he was saying, these microgrids, they don't have to be this kind of daunting thing that is in front of you and you don't know how to start. I mean, getting the right partner here is going to be huge.
Sure, absolutely.
Another thing that I picked up, fleet managers and facilities managers talking to each other.
Yeah.
Communication in any sort of business sense, always very, very important. But in the case like this, this technology is so new. People haven't had to go through these steps before. Right. And so in a lot of cases, there's no reason that they should have had to talk to each other in the past, And so having everyone on the same page and understanding, okay, we're saving money here, we might have to invest a little more here.
Right.
And just kind of everybody being involved in that conversation, obviously really important. So I think that was a really, really big takeaway for me.
Absolutely.
Well, Christian, thank you for joining me today.
Thanks for having me. I loved it.
It's always a pleasure. I hope you will stop by again.
I'll be back.
I'm sure our audience appreciates it too.
Sir, thank you.
And everyone, we'll catch you next time.
See ya.